It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
The tendencies of the left at this point, they are obsessed with socialism and they are obsessed with the Green New Deal, as they call it. Of course, the cure to climate change is socialism. Those are their ideas. Even President Trump at CPAC, one of the things he said about wind energy, he made fun of it in terms of saying, like, honey, is the wind blowing today? I'd like to watch television. I thought that was pretty funny. We have this headline here. The Green New Deal is estimated to cost $93 trillion. Here to talk a little bit about that. What would that do to the economy? We have economist Dr. Michael Busler is on the line. He's a professor at Stockton University. Dr. Busler, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well, and thank you for having me. It's always my pleasure to be here.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We're always very excited to have you on. Did you catch that headline at all last week? $93 trillion if Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez gets what she wants.
Yeah, I did see that. I'm not sure that may even be a little bit low when you consider everything that she wants to do. Look, when you get down to the basics, climate is changing. There's no doubt about that. Climate has been changing for thousands of years. There are places where you have deserts now, used to have fertile ground, and vice versa. So the climate is always changing. The left says the climate change is being accelerated by human activity. While they claim that's a fact, most of the scientific community is not quite sure that's the case. And to upend your entire economy for something that may not be effective is really not a very good idea. You know, I'm old enough to remember back in the early 1970s, the scientists were saying in 50 years we're likely to have an ice age. Now they've changed that, and we're having a global warming issue. So things like this operate cyclically, and before we go about destroying an entire economy, we ought to think a little bit harder about this. What they want to do, essentially, is take over the healthcare industry, which accounts for about 17% of all economic activity, take over the energy industry, and really they're proposing taking over much of the of education by offering free college tuition for at least 2 years to every American. Now, all of those programs would bankrupt the country, and they're really counter to what made this country great. You know, when you take a look at it, the U.S. went from the birth of a nation in the late 1700s to the number one most prosperous economy in the world in about 150 years. There were other nations that are hundreds of years older, some thousands of years older, yet we were able to do that in a short period of time and maintain it. The reason was, in my opinion, there were four basic values we had. We valued individual freedom and freedom in markets. Mm-hmm. We valued individual responsibility, where people were primarily responsible for their own welfare. We had a system that had very low rates of taxation, and indeed we founded this country because we were overtaxed in the first place. And fourthly, we had a very limited role for government. With that, people were free to pursue their dreams. They were free to keep most of the income that they earned, and the country prospered. Everything this Green New Deal wants to do is exactly opposite to that. It would take away individual freedoms. The government would control key industries. Once they control the healthcare and education, they would mandate who gets what. They lose individual freedom. The government would take care of people, so you'd lose individual responsibility. To pay for this, you're going to have massive tax increases, not just on the wealthy, but mostly on the middle class. So we have high taxes rather than low. And now you have the government involved in major industries, so it's a big role for government rather than a small role. So it's everything that's against the values that made this country great.
Let me ask you this. We're talking with Dr. Michael Busler. So this is a big Democrat leftist idea. I wonder if you think that do Republicans have any? I don't know. Do they have any difficulty convincing some on what a bad deal this is? I guess that's the reason is because historically, Republicans they do say that they are against those things that you just mentioned about higher taxes and the loss of individual liberty and things like that. But over time, the Republicans have supported some of those things.
Yes, they have. And really the country started to lean into more social responsibility right around the turn of the century. In early 1900s, 1913, we put the federal income tax in, and that kept going. The rates kept going up. We put the Social Security in 1936, and that increased taxes and took more social responsibility. Then we had the Medicare in the mid-'60s, which also added to taxes and more social responsibility. The mood of the country was that we should, because we are so prosperous, we should have more of a social responsibility. And I think the Republicans, even though philosophically they may have been against it, I think they just sort of went along with it because that seemed to be what the majority of the people want.
Yeah.
You bring up a very good point, though. If we're trying to convince people that socialism is not right, we have to make a good argument. Part of the reason it's so popular now, especially with younger people, is the economy has been stagnant for decades. Prior to 2018, we just missed 3% growth, but prior to 2018, the last year we had 3% annual growth was 2005. The last period we had, last time we had 4% annual growth was the year 2000. That's the longest period of economic stagnation, in my opinion, in U.S. history. The result of that was that college graduates couldn't find jobs that suited their qualifications, so they took jobs where you didn't really need a college degree, and now they're very upset at that. Because they took those jobs, people without college degrees didn't have any opportunity. They dropped out of the workforce, became discouraged workers. There's still about 5 or 6 million of those. They're pretty unhappy too. So when you talk to these people that are unhappy about what's happening, and you mentioned socialistic programs, that tends to be very appealing to them.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I think President Trump is fixing this by growing the economy and giving people opportunity. The idea of socialism will not be as appealing.
That is a great point, Dr. Busler, about, you don't really think about basically a generation of people that have not had a good economy to, pursue their dreams and accomplish what they want to accomplish. And so when you read in the Green New Deal, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she had a botched rollout of the whole thing, and she released a document that actually had on, and then they went back and edited it, but they wanted to promise economic security for those even unwilling to work. Now, if you're stuck at a dead-end job somewhere, maybe socialism sounds good, because people are going to think about themselves first.
That's exactly right. And, you bring up a great point. There's a whole generation here that has never felt American prosperity. You need the economy to grow at least at a 4% annual rate. That'll give opportunity for everybody. With all that growth, we're producing more, the standard of living goes up, and you feel prosperous. This generation has never felt prosperity. And as a result of that, having the government give me things that I don't have the opportunity to get for myself looks very appealing. And I say to my college students, I teach in a university that was started as a liberal arts college, so it's still very liberal oriented. But I tell them, look, while you tend to favor these things today, once you get out there and start working and earning a good income, you're going to realize to pay for all those things you wanted, it's coming out of your paycheck.
Yes.
And you're going to realize that you're working and you're losing a third or more of your income to pay for all these programs. But when I was in college, I went through the same thing. Look, I was back in the days of hippies, back in the late 60s and early 70s, and we favored government helping everybody. And then we got into the workforce, and we said, hey, look, all these things, we're finally making a good income, but I don't seem to be living a high standard of living, and I turn around and look at my paycheck, and the reason is I'm paying all these taxes, federal income tax, state income tax, sales taxes, property taxes, etc. So I say to my students, once you get out there, you may have a different view.
Can we talk real quick about the economy? The numbers came out, I think it was on Friday. It misses 3%. It comes in at 2.9%. Was that surprising to you? Because I know we had talked before, Dr. Busler, and we both of us were very optimistic about the types of GDP growth we could see. Yeah.
I'll tell you, things were going along real well until the month of December. And then, for some reason, everybody just sort of panicked. They started saying a recession is coming. The stock market was collapsing. And I said at the time, there really is no reason for stock prices to be falling. As a result of that, people got very nervous. The personal income was good in December, but retail sales and consumption were down, mostly because people got nervous and started saving their money. The personal savings rate, which is usually a little under 5%, for the month of December was up over 7.5%, up to 7.5%. So people got real nervous. The month of December tanked, and as a result of that, we're just going to miss it. Now, there is a revision coming out at the end of March, and they may revise it upward slightly. But we were on course for 3% until December hit. I think this year we're on course for a little over 3%. So I expect the economy to do a little better this year than it did last year.
Interesting. Well, the president certainly has everybody on the left and, some never-Trumpers. I mean, they certainly don't want the economy to do well at all, just because they don't like the man personally. That's what's so frustrating with me is we have liberals that want the economy to do bad. They want their fellow countrymen to do worse, just because they have a personal disagreement with the president of the United States, and that's very, very sad.
I think it's terrible. The priorities are supposed to be what's good for the country first, and then you consider what is good for your party. The Democrats have it backwards. They want to do what's good for their party, and then whatever happens to the country is after that. They were elected to lead and move things forward. They're spending all of their time investigating things, and clearly the Mueller report will be out any day now, I think, and we'll see what Bill Barr releases, probably all or most of it. But I believe it's going to show that there was no collusion with the Trump campaign. There was no obstruction of justice, and it's time to just drop this thing. Now you got this Jerry Nadler saying, well, based on what Cohen said in front of Congress the other day, there's 60 more people in the Trump organization that I want to interview. Now, I'll tell you, if you start interviewing all these, you're going to find some place where someone forgot to dot an I or cross a T, and the mainstream media is going to make a big thing out of this. It's detracting from the president doing his job. Look, in spite of every Democrat being against Trump, and in spite of 90% of the media coverage negative about Trump, and in spite of the fact some members of his own party don't even go along with him, in spite of all that, he's been able to accomplish some tremendous things. Imagine if people worked with him, how much more we could get done, and that's what frustrates me.
That's a really good point. And you mentioned Nadler. I mean, I was listening to a clip of him this morning coming into work, and he was saying that in order to impeach a president, you have to first go to the American people and convince them that he needs to be impeached. And I thought, well, that's not what you have to do to impeach somebody at all. You got to find an actual crime. It's not a popularity contest. We have to find a crime that was committed. I mean, it's just nuts. It's all politics. That's all it is. If it comes down to having to convince the people it needs to be done, then to me it's politics at that point. So
that's absolutely right. Look, the fact is the Democrats still haven't gotten over the fact that they lost in 2016. And from the first day, literally, that President Trump took office, you had Maxine Waters running around screaming, impeach 45, impeach 45. He didn't even get into office to do anything yet, and you're ready to impeach. I think the Democrats' behavior is disgusting and really despicable.
Yeah.
You should really, whether you like the president or not, he is the president. You have to support the president and do what's right for the the country. He's over there trying to negotiate for the first time. North Korea says that we will get rid of the nuclear weapons. For the first time, they're negotiating that, and the Democrats put on a display that just weakens the president.
Exactly.
They have to put the country forward rather than their party.
Yeah, I mean, there's some people that think that the North Koreans were bold enough that they were told by the Chinese, hey, listen, the Trump administration needs a win right now because he's being destroyed back home. And I don't think that's crazy talk. I think that easily could have been what the North Koreans were thinking. And so, I mean, it's of course, it's all speculation, but you never know. And Dr. Busler, I really appreciate you having you on. It's always great to talk to you, sir.
Thank you, Paul. It's always my pleasure.
All righty. Dr. Michael Busler, everybody. He is a professor at Stockton University, as well a professor of finance there. And obviously, he's an economics expert, and we're always thrilled to have him on.